Why should anybody listen to me? There's too much competition in the coaching world. What have I got of value that someone would pay me for? Have you found yourself asking these insecure, self-destroying, self-destructive sort of questions that makes you procrastinate in putting content out onto your page? Hello everyone, my name is Henry and today I'm going to be talking about that exact problem. This problem I have faced for a majority of my content creating life. I face it every single day. It's imposter syndrome. It's a comparison and it's in search of perfectionism that we hit. We feel imposter syndrome because I don't feel that I am worthy of giving value that people would pay me for, or that I have anything of value to add, or I cannot live up to the identity that I claim to be. I feel like an imposter. I have comparison issues where I know that in the market there are literally thousands, if not millions, of other coaches who can do the job better than me. Why would they want to come to me? And the third part is I'm obviously not experienced. I haven't done it for many years. I can't compete with the high production value that some of these coaches are doing. I'm very basic. I'm starting from the very beginning, so I have perfection issues as well. These are just three common examples that stops people from creating content into their coaching world because they just feel overwhelmed by imposter syndrome, comparison, and perfectionism. In this video, I'm going to try to give you a new perspective on the way to look at this particular problem in a way that turns from pessimistic to an optimistic view. So hopefully by the end, it gives you the inspiration and a new way of thinking about how you should create content so you can get your word out there, your message to the world, and then you can hopefully give yourself the chance that you deserve to be successful as the coach that you dream to be. Now I'm going to let's talk about the imposter syndrome at the very start. Now, without going too deep on what imposter syndrome is, it simply means that you don't feel as though that you're worthy of the identity that you claim to be. For example, I claim to be a speaking coach. I help content creators, coaches to be more confident with their voice on camera or out in public. Now, that's an identity that I was not born with. So there was a stage in life where that was not me, if not the opposite. Now, those people who know my story, I am, Australian-born Chinese. In here in Australia, our common language or our primary language is English, so I wasn't brought up with English. So there was speaking and confident issues, insecurity issues from the very beginning of my life. So I wasn't born a articulate, clear, confident speaker, which I claim right now that people have blessed me with compliments that I seem to be. It wasn't always this way, but yet somehow now in the present, I can speak the way that I speak now. So with imposter syndrome, I guess the reason why I feel that is because I can remember all those negative stories, all those negative feelings that I felt growing up, going through the challenges of not being able to speak confidently to people, around people, be that with friends or girls or work colleagues or even employers or people of a higher authority. I used to struggle with all that. So I know the feeling of that, and all those negative emotions, I still carry them with me to some degree. Yet, with persistence and growing through and with training and believing and working on myself, I was able to get to from that point to where I am today. So does that mean I am an imposter? Does that mean that I don't belong with this new identity? Because that's what imposter syndrome simply is. It's an incongruency of identity. I think I'm a speaker coach, but deep down I feel as though that I'm still that little boy who speaks Cantonese as a primary language back at school, who didn't want to be known as the odd one out, the only Chinese student in an all Caucasian school. So I hold multiple identities, and I have this complex and this challenge inside my mind of who am I? Where do I belong? And where do I what's the right answer and what's the wrong answer? The problem is with imposter syndrome is we are always evolving. We are always evolving to be a better version of ourselves. And by its nature, through evolution and through every achievement, through every bit of growth, you are becoming a new person. Much like an animal who needs to shed its skin to become a new form of evolution. Like, be that, let's take for example, a reptile that has to take off its skin, like a snake or something. They actually have to shed the skin to become the new form of themselves. They weren't that before. But after shedding that skin, they transcended to a new form of existence, if you want to put it that way. That's very much the same with imposter syndrome. What happens to our identity? When we overcome skills and challenges, we are evolving into a new way of being. We've never been this person before. We are vulnerable. And that is scary. And that's one way of looking at imposter syndrome. Now, what I want to give you to nail this down is that if you identify yourself as an ongoing student, a student who learns through trial, error, and mistakes and learns from feedback and reflection, yes, you may have been a person who struggled with language at this point, but you've accepted the fact that through growth, through the training, through improvement or self-improvement, you will eventually get better. So that's how we can tackle imposter syndrome, if that is what's stopping you from creating content. The next part that I want to talk about is the comparison issue, where we find ourselves comparing with people whom we deem as far more successful than who we are. Like, take me, who wants to be a speaker coach. There are people out there that have got it way worked out more than I do. They're making envious amount of money. They've got the following, they've got the authority, they've got the charisma, and who am I to compete with them? And to a degree that is true. But just know that you are not them and they are not you. And this is a blessing, a double-edged sword away. It's a blessing in disguise, because you shouldn't try to be like someone else. Sure, it's fine to be able to have inspiration from people who have done it better. That's no problem. You're allowed to emulate. You're allowed to even teach the same thing that they have taught. Because what I find is you are unique. There's only one you. And if I was to compare myself with someone else, we're not comparing, the same person. We're not comparing two apples are not alike, is what I'm saying. Like, you're totally different. I have my own story. And it's the story that separates you. It's what separates me. Like, for example, I could be a speaking coach, but in my 40 years of existence, even just putting myself as being a 40-year-old sets me apart from all other coaches. If there's a coach that's at 30 years old and I'm 40, I have an advantage over them because I've experienced, 10 extra years of life. I speak to a different generation of people. I can relate to a different generation of people. I come from Australia, so if my competition or the person who I look up from comes from America, I have a different geographic location. Suppose the clients or people who want to improve their spoken ability come from Australia. I have the advantage of being in a more suitable time zone because I share the same time zone as potential my client, as opposed to someone who's in America who's like on the opposite side of the world. That is an advantage there. What about what makes me me in my story? I can talk about things where a part of my life, for people who know that I've been a photographer, a travel photographer. So if someone who wants to improve in their speaking has a slight or a keen interest in photography, they're going to be more attuned to my story and my examples that I use. Or they might find a liking or a way to connect with me. So how many speaking coaches do you know who are also travel photographers? So that narrows the number down. The competition just gets sliced more than half. And if I was to add another layer to that, how many speaking coaches do you know who are travel photographers who are Australian-born Chinese, who is 40 years old? Notice when I start adding parts that I identify myself as, the competition and the way to compare becomes far less. And this is how you set yourself apart. You set yourself apart with your story, your experiences, and just being you, because there's no other you in this world. So that's a way to take out the comparison theory or the comparison issue. Now, finally, the last part was perfectionism. I'm not good enough, I can't compete with the high production value that these more seasoned people have brought out. That is true, simply because I'm newer into this world. And one of the best forms of advantage that I find is that if I consider myself, let's just say a level 10, comparing myself to a level 100, us as people can only see within a very small scope. We have a different audience. The person who's at level 100 has a very different cohort to where I'm at. I can relate to someone who perhaps could be I am far more relatable to someone who's at level 1 than someone who's at level 1. Me being at level 10 is far more relatable to someone who's at level 1 as opposed to someone who's at level 100 to someone who's at level 1. This is, if you want to think about it in this way, when you're a student at school and you're at grade 2, so you're about 7 years old, who are you going to relate to more? The person who's at grade 3 or the university professor who has been a professor for the last 20 years? Because that's how you compare. The person who's at grade 2 is going to relate far more to the person who's at grade 3, because the time and the distance and the emotional, the remembrance. The person who's at grade 3 can relate to the person who's at grade 2 far better and far more effectively than the professor who wasn't a grade 2 for the last, who knows, many, many decades. So don't worry about being right. Don't worry about being perfect. Don't compare yourself to the perfect person. The best way is just do the best you can. Do what you can do now. Be genuine, and be genuine in the value that you offer to these people. So that's all I have for this particular video. I hope that you found some value in here. So just to recap, the 3 things that stop people from creating content into the world that has stopped me is 1, imposter syndrome, 2, comparison, and 3, perfectionism. And just to sum it up, imposter syndrome, don't worry, you're forever evolving. As you get better, you've never been that identity before. That is normal, is supposed to happen. 2, comparison. Use your story. Your story is what separates you from the person whom you are comparing to. And thirdly, perfectionism. Although you may be a level 10, you can relate to people around your level far better than those who are at a level 100 comparing to the same pool of people. Hey, if you found value in these videos and that you just give yourself a comment, write yourself a comment, give myself a thumbs up. Hope to make more video like this and make some suggestions on what you want me to talk about next in the following videos. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.